So thank you all for joining us for our learning session on how to present your research. My name is Dr. Amanda Berry, and I'm the lead of the Office of Research Trainees. I'm joined here by our coordinator, Jordan Beck. And we're really excited to share with you some tips for making stellar presentations and give you some information about how you can share your research and what you've learned this summer with the community. So I want to start this session by first acknowledging the land on which UHN operates. There has been a UHN hospital on this land since 1829. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. We remember and honor the legacy of the people who have come here before us and all who work to make the promise and the challenge of truth and reconciliation real. So I'd love to take a moment for all of us to reflect on the land that we are on, especially since all of us may be joining from different places. If you'd like to receive your own land information, you can text your city and province to the number on the screen. And there are also other resources if you use the QR code on the slide. Thank you. So we're really excited. Today is the 5th learning session of the UHN Summer Training and Research Program. The summer is going quickly. And we are excited for all of the sessions that we've had so far and the ones that we have coming up. So we hope you'll join us on July 27th for a session with our colleagues from Baycrest Hospital on resumes and cover letters. That one should be really useful for everybody, as you'll probably have to make a resume and cover letter at some point in your life, if not soon. If this is the first session you're joining us for, welcome. We're glad to have you. You can catch up on all of the sessions that you've missed by viewing the recordings on our YouTube channel, and we'll also send out the links in our recap email tomorrow. For any of the UHN research summer students, a reminder that you have to watch or attend 4 learning sessions and share your research to receive a certificate of program completion. And today we're going to share with you all the details of how you can share your research and how you can have a chance to present in person at our research and networking day, which should be really exciting. So I'm going to run through a little bit of the details of this opportunity. This opportunity is only available to UHN research summer students, but that can be from any student from any kind of background. So undergrad, college students, high school students, graduate students. As long as you're working or volunteering at UHN in research this summer, you're welcome to participate. We hope that you'll take this opportunity to join the research presentations and share what you've learned this summer with the UHN research community. By doing so, you'll be eligible to receive the certificate of program completion, of course, if you also attend the learning sessions or watch the recordings. And you'll also be eligible to win prizes for the best summer research presentations. This will include not only monetary prizes, but also the chance to present live at the in-person UHN STAR Research and Networking Day on August 10th at 2 p.m. So this is a really fantastic experience. It's something that you'll learn a lot of skills yourself from. It's a good practice and exercise. There's also something you can include on your resumes and on your LinkedIn profile. So we really hope that you'll consider participating. There's a question in the chat of how do we provide confirmation of having watched the recordings and if we can post the link for where we can find the recordings. All of that information will get emailed out to all of the registrants tomorrow. So if you got my email yesterday reminding you about this session, you'll be on our email list and you'll get the email tomorrow that'll have the link for where to put your attendance and all of the recordings, including the recording for this session. Thanks for that question. So a little bit more about these presentations. So to participate, UHN research students must register using the QR code on the right. So you can see it on the slide here. Jordan will also be putting it in the chat, and we will also send it by email tomorrow. So you'll have access to that and all of the instructions. We ask that you please register by July 24th so that we can send you all of the relevant information you need to prepare these presentations. You'll then have the opportunity to prepare a 3-minute recorded presentation where you can share what you learned this summer. Now, this can be anything that you learned this summer, so you don't have to just think about the data that you may have generated or the experiments that you did that may or may not have worked. This isn't really about data, it can be about anything you want. So we encourage you to present about your favorite experience at UHN, about what you learned about the research field that you're working in, or even about how your summer contributed to your professional development. It's up to you, anything that you want. We just want to hear about what you learned this summer while you were working or volunteering at UHN Research. These presentations have to be a maximum of 3 minutes in length. And so that is a hard stop. If your presentation is any longer than that, you will be disqualified. You're welcome to use any slides or visuals if you'd like. Now, all the presentations must be uploaded by July 27th at 5 p.m. Instructions on where and how to upload your presentations will be sent out after you register using the registration link on this slide. All the presentations will be judged and we'll announce the winners on August 3rd. Whether you receive an opportunity to present on August 10th or not, we encourage you all to attend the Research and Networking Day on August 10th so they can hear about all of the other stuff that summer students are doing, as well as network with other summer students and other people in the UHN research community. There's a question in the chat if you can participate in this seminar, if we will also be participating in other seminars. That is a great question, and yes, you can. We were providing this opportunity to anybody from UHN Research. We know that many of you might have other opportunities to present, and that's okay. You can still present here. And especially if you don't have any other opportunities to present, we hope that you'll take an opportunity to this. And we have another question about whether these presentations are similar to scientific posters. You can view it like that if you want, but I think posters aren't necessarily always the most effective way to communicate, as there's a lot of information on those posters. And so we'll give you an example in a second of what these presentations can look like. But if you're already making a poster for another presentation and you'd like to use that for this, that's fine too. We're pretty flexible. We'll give you more information in a second on how to make great presentations. Okay. So for any of you that are debating about whether you want to participate or not, maybe because you don't feel comfortable speaking in front of others or you don't feel confident in your skills, I want you to only take home one main piece of advice. And that is that anybody can become a great communicator. Some people are born with excellent communication skills, and we've all met those kind of people that can speak about anything at any point in time. But a lot of us, including myself, are not. First time I had to give a presentation, I almost passed out, and I was a bumbling mess. But over time, you can improve your communication skills. I feel very confident as a communicator now, and I want to provide some easy steps of how you can become more confident and build up those skills. So the first thing is to do your research, and this is just to help you to learn more about what makes a good presentation and what are some skills of how to communicate. And so just by attending today, you're going to learn a whole bunch of information about how to make great presentations. And that's part of that research process. So you're already checking that one off your list. The next best thing that you can do is practice your presentations as much as possible and seek opportunities to present as much as possible. This really gives you the opportunity to build your experience and to build your skills. I know for me, when I get really nervous, I forget what I'm supposed to talk about. So I like practicing my presentation while I'm going on walks and while I'm in the shower. So I know that I know my material and I know exactly what I'm going to say. So if I get really nervous, it's okay because I remember my whole presentation. Other people don't work well like that, and that's really fine. Other people need to just know the gist of it, and it needs to be more fluid by making it up on the spot, and that's fine too. It's really practicing will help you to develop your skills, but also understand what's best for you and what your presentation style is like. Another great thing that you can do is get constructive criticism from others and use it to help improve your presentation style and skills. We're going to talk a little bit at the end about who you can go to for help with this and what kind of feedback you should ask for. And always know that it may feel uncomfortable at first, but try to seek out these experiences. And you'll slowly, by getting out of your comfort zone, you'll slowly build those skills until it is a comfortable place for you. So stay tuned for the rest of the presentation for lots more on how to improve your communication skills. Okay, so first we're going to start by watching a video of a 3-minute thesis presentation. And these are presentations where graduate students explain their thesis projects in 3 minutes and with one static slide. So this is kind of an example of a similar thing of what you'll be doing. So this presentation is from Emily, who won first place at U of T in 2023. And while you watch it, I want you to think about why this presentation was a winner. So
In the summer of 1990, my Uncle Ron was in the prime of his life. He started his career, he had the house and the wife and two young boys. And then one day in July, he was rushed to the ER. 2 days later, he died of leukemia. For many illnesses, including leukemia, early detection has a huge chance on your chance of survival. Often there are things that could have been done, but by the time you know the disease is there, it's too late. My research is making a new kind of technology that can warn doctors when disease is coming. The way this technology will work is by detecting tiny changes in the levels of your protein. I know most people think of proteins as soy or chicken, but for today, I need you to think of proteins as the tiny machines that keep you running. There are thousands of different types of these little protein machines. And when your body is attacked by a disease, the amount of each type changes. So a person with Alzheimer's might have too many copies of proteins A, B, and Z, while a person with leukemia might have too many copies of proteins X and Y. I am making a detector that is sensitive enough to tell when your levels are starting to drift, and so slightly, maybe even months before you develop symptoms. To do this, my detector needs to identify individual proteins so it can count them. I'm starting by copycatting the technology that identifies DNA. That's the left side of my slide. That detector works by threading a string of DNA through a tiny hole. It reads out each rung of the DNA as they pass through the hole one by one. In theory, we could use this same detector to identify protein, but there's one problem. Protein strings fold up like a tangled ball of yarn, and those can't be threaded through the hole. How I'm fixing this is shown on the right side. I'm working on developing an extra piece, a detangler, that will grab the tail of the folded protein and unravel it before sending it through the detector. If this technology had existed in 1990, a regular checkup could have told us that my Uncle Ron had a little too much protein X and Y, and we would have known he was about to develop leukemia. I wonder what could have been done differently if we had known. But the thing is, this technology, it's not just for leukemia, but for nearly any disease, because they all affect your protein levels. What I'm trying to do here is create the tools we need so that we can live in a future where instead of treat disease, we can prevent disease. Thanks.
Okay. Oops. So now I just want to reflect a little bit on that video that we saw using Slido. So you can use the QR code on the slide or go to slido.com and use the code on the screen. And let's have a discussion about what made that presentation particularly effective. And why do you think that it won? And we'd love to hear any ideas that you have. So we have somebody said that she didn't just present her research, she told a story, which is exactly it. She really tried to get you to understand the story behind it with her uncle and how devastating that was for their family and how this could help. She used really great visuals, which is a good point. They were very simple. There weren't a lot of words on them. There was a clear motivation, analogies to make the viewer understand better. There was a personal connection to her research. They used plain language, explained in layman's terms, no jargon. It was very personal. The emotional aspect, yep. She explained a lot instead of writing too much on the slides. That's a good one too. She compared it to things that were already in the field and how she's adding to existing tech. That's great. So yeah, these are a lot of the elements of what makes a good presentation. And I think that Emily did it so great, and that's why it was a winning presentation. So I'd love, going back to the idea of doing your research, these 3-minute theses are really great videos for you to watch. You can go on YouTube and just type in 3-minute thesis because it's such a great exercise. There's people who've been working on projects for 5 years, but they find a way to summarize their whole project in an engaging way in just 3 minutes. So really looking at those presentations can give you an idea of all of these elements of what you want to do well in your presentation. So I'm going to jump in and talk a little bit about storytelling, which is one of the tools that Emily used. You saw it very much in how she told the story of her uncle and weeded her information about her project into that. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how you can improve your presentations with storytelling. So why is storytelling so important? Well, when you're presenting, no matter what the topic you're presenting on, it's very important to capture your audience's attention from the very start. And I like to do this by sharing something exciting, because from the first second that we're sitting here and you're all listening to me, there are a million different things that are competing for your attention, especially in a virtual environment. So in the audience right now, I could have people who are checking their email, they're analyzing their data, people are in a group chat texting about what their plans are going to be tonight. Some people are maybe working on presentations themselves. People are scrolling through TikTok or Threads or any other social media platform. And other people are making plans. And so it's really challenging to keep an audience's attention, especially if you don't capture it properly from the start. So you really want to be exciting, engaging, and use storytelling to capture their attention and keep it for the rest of the presentation. So what are the elements of storytelling and how can you use this? So in general, storytelling is very simple, very similar to reading a book. You're just telling a story, and you want to do this instead of just sharing the facts about what you're talking about. Because in general, people remember stories, but they don't remember facts. So if you give them a narrative to follow, they'll be more engaged in it. And some of the elements of storytelling involve explaining the why, just like Emily did. Why is this important? Why am I doing this project? Why did I work at UHN for the summer? Or what did I hope to achieve from it? And those more emotional aspects or more interesting aspects are what people are drawn to more than the facts of what you did every day. You can also excite the audience and tell them a little bit about the impact of the research area. So Emily did this by talking about how the research that they're doing can be used in all different kinds of disease areas. So they not only could have helped her uncle with cancer, but it also could have helped lots of other people with lots of other diseases. And so that's something that you can discuss in your presentation. And you can also share the most exciting thing that you've learned. If there's something that you're really excited about, the audience wants to hear it and would be excited too. So make sure that you bring that and you share that. Now, of course, you have a very limited period of time. In the presentations we're talking about, you have only 3 minutes. So you really need to jump in. And sometimes that can be useful to use a structure. So if you think about how you learned about telling stories in when you were a kid, we're always taught that stories always have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I kind of like that idea of giving the structure in that way. So you start off by capturing the audience's attention. And Emily did that by telling you the story about her uncle. Then in the middle, you can share the details. So that's when Emily talked about the details of her work and what the approach was and how she did it. And at the end of the story, you want to create a summary, put all of the elements back together, and maybe even give a cool conclusion of what it can be used for in the future or what the impact of that will be. So try to use a structure where you can tell a clear story that is thread over the 3 minutes of time. Now, one of the things I like to do when creating a talk is focus on one main point, especially when you have such a limited time. What's one thing that you would want the audience to remember? This helps you to reinforce the beginning and the end, and also helps you to not try to explain too much in a very short period of time. So think about if people leave your presentation and only can remember one single thing, what would that be? And then make sure that you reinforce that over and over again. And lastly, a really powerful tool is to create effective visuals to help complement the story. And we'll talk about how to create visuals in the next section. So some other elements of effective storytelling include being engaged and being excited. And I think Emily did that really well by varying her voice and really showing the impact of how the story felt to her. She was really excited about what she was working on, which I think is really great. I think another thing is also speaking at an appropriate pace. We will often lose sight or lose track in presentations when people speak too slow, and then they're very, very boring, and it's hard to keep track. Or when they speak super fast and you can't keep up with what they're talking about, that can be really hard for storytelling. So you really want to make sure you're speaking at a good pace. You also want to make sure that you're tailoring to the audience. So how you prepare your presentations will differ depending on whether you're talking to your PI or your lab mates who know everything about your research field, or if you're going to a conference and everybody's in the same field, but not in the same lab and not the exact same area. Or in this case, when you're sharing your research with all of UHN research, you're going to be sharing your research with people in very different fields. And so you really want to make sure that you're providing all the information that they need to understand that and basing it to more of an audience who knows a lot about science but doesn't know about the field you're working in. You also want to make sure that you're explaining any of the background information that they need to understand. Don't assume that they know certain things because that's where people can get lost. And also explain any images you have on the slides, because if you have images there, especially if you have graphs or things like that, but you don't go through them and explain them, then people aren't really going to get the point. Most important, and many people brought this up, you want to avoid jargon. So any, words that are common to your field that other people might not know and could get them lost, as well as acronyms. We all know in science, there's lots of acronyms that we use in our research and in our fields, but that's a really easy way to lose people because you're using acronyms that people might not be able to keep track of, and then they have no idea what you're talking about anymore. So definitely try to not include those. And of course, less is more. And so this is something that's so important, especially when you're speaking with short periods of time. Include less slides, less details, less facts, and less images. Really stick to one story plot, one story point, and only add things to your slides or your presentations that's really important to tell that story. So I think one of the other ways that we can talk about how to be a good storyteller and learn about what the elements of good presentations are is by thinking about the presentations that we've been to in the past. And so I just want you to reflect. We'll take a couple minutes again on Slido from your experience as an audience member. What mistakes do you think that presenters often make that cause you to stop listening? What's one of those things that you see in presentations and all of a sudden you're not paying attention anymore because they lost you? Too much jargon. 100% that is, I think, the thing the most. If you can't understand, you're not going to be able to keep up. Too much information on the slides, monotone voice. That one really bothers me a lot. I can't handle that. Word vomit. Yep. Equations, lots of equations, any kind of text that's too much. Typos, that's a big red flag for a lot of people. Typos, grammar, any kind of mistakes like that can really bother people and can really cause you to tune out. Distracting visuals, not enough eye contact. Yeah, going on about one thing for too long. So not pacing yourself properly, not only in your tone of voice, but also how you go through the slides. Not explaining things on the slides, reading off the text. Absolutely. Getting lost in how you're describing things. Yeah, absolutely. So these are lots of great points. So when you think about all of these things that people have done before in the past that have caused you to get lost in presentations, we want to try to avoid all of those things. So keep that in mind when you're preparing your presentation. Next, I want to talk a little bit about, many of you brought up that bad visuals can really be distracting. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to create effective visuals as well as ones that are very inclusive, because you really want to make sure that you're engaging your whole audience and not only some of them. So one of the things that's really great about visuals is that they can be so much more powerful than using tables or written verbal explanations. So, when I put a picture like this up, It's a powerful image, and you may not know exactly what they're talking about or what the point is, but it makes you think about something and it causes an emotion in you. And that emotion, again, is what's going to help people remember your presentation. So we really want to focus on minimizing the words on your slide and maximizing the effective pictures or graphics. And again, when we minimize the words on our slides, we're stopping people from just reading the slide instead of listening to us. We really want them to be doing both, listening to us and looking at the pictures. And so many of us have seen bad visuals in the past. I wanted to pull an example here. This was a visual from a paper that I was reading recently. And in this, obviously, this is not an effective visual or obvious to me, but I hope you can see elements about why this isn't effective either. You know, the words are really small, all the lines are overlapping, you can't see where anything is connected. And so these are the kinds of things, it's boring because it's all gray. I want to try to avoid making bad visuals and work towards making better ones. And so some of the characteristics of great visuals are having clean and simple designs. So if you have something that's really complicated, try splitting it up into many different visuals. So maybe they could have taken this network and split it up into smaller subsets so you could actually see some of the points, especially if you were showing points that were related to the story so that you could see those connections. You really want all the details in a visual to be there and that they're easy to see. So sometimes a lot of the graphs and things like that might be missing labels or data points that you need to be able to read, or the text might be too small. Those kind of things can really distract people. So you want to make sure that all of the information, like the legend for how they can interpret the graph, are there so people can understand. You want to use the appropriate use of color. You want to make sure you're using some color to make it more engaging and more exciting, but using color in an appropriate way. And again, we'll talk about that in a couple of slides. It's really important that you have a proper utilization of space so that you're using the whole slide and spacing things out so it's not too crowded, but also that you have a balance of white space. And so one of the things a lot of people tend to do is put too much on their slide and there isn't white space around. Your eyes need that white space to be able to focus and really have, you know, focal points and not have it a little bit too overwhelmed. Now, for the type of presentations we're talking about, which are short talks, if you can avoid using data and putting data on your slide, I think that's great. There's lots of ways you can use model slides instead, which we'll talk about in a second. But if you are going to show data, really think about what the effective type of visual to show your data is. There's lots of different kinds of graphs or you know, ways you can show your data, and choosing the right one can really make it more effective. And again, we'll talk about that in a couple minutes. Okay, so now I want to give you some examples, just like Emily's, but some other examples of what you would do with one slide in a very visual way to explain your project or your research or things like that. So this is an example slide from BioRender, which we'll talk about in a second. But this is a really clean image where there's lots of white space around the edges. You can also see that there's bright colors. And you take something like understanding what's in human serum albumin, which is something, you know, that many people work with. And it really clearly breaks it down. So you can see what the different components are. And then you can see a zoomed in version of a crystal structure of some of the domains. So this is a really beautiful image that kind of tells a point. You could easily imagine somebody speaking on top of this about the science. You can also include some of bullet points on the bottom of some of the main points that you want people to take home. So I think this is an effective image. Another example is here. This is an example of a diagram of the different stages of autophagy in cancer cells. So again, this is made with BioRender. It's a visually appealing diagram. It's very simple. It has minimal text, and it just tells a story of how autophagy works. So this is a kind of diagram that you can use. Here's another example here where if I was giving in this presentation, I might be trying to discuss the difference between a structural MRI scan and a functional MRI scan, and what better way to do that than just using a really strong picture to demonstrate the difference. And there may be some words at the bottom that can give an explanation, but you're really focusing on these images. And a lot of the times when you're using images like microscopy images or scans like this, use a black background just to create more contrast between the image and the background. So those are some examples of some really effective visuals that you can make. And we'll give you some suggestions on how you can make it. All of those were made using BioRender. They were actually all templates. I didn't even make them myself. BioRender is a database that you can use to make professional looking pictures. It's really easy to use. They have over 4,000 life science images that you can use in your, pop into your presentations. They also have templates that you can start off with and edit from there, which is great. What I love about this is that it's free to use for educational purposes, so you can use them for presentations and things like that. You only have to pay for them if you're using them in publications. You can talk to your supervisor about this if you want support, but I love that they have really detailed images that really can be useful in science presentations and makes them seem so much more professional if you're using these really cool BioRender images. Some of the other places that you can find free images to use for your presentations are Canva. This is software I use a lot for creating presentations and different marketing materials. They have lots of stock images, both actual photos, like the photo of somebody doing rehab here, but they also have different kind of icons and things that you can use to create different model slides or different pictures to explain your research or what you learned this summer. If you're looking for more icons, the Noun Project is a really cool website where a lot of their images are free for you to use. They have different science-related images. Same with Flat Icon. It's another one. A lot of these are black and white and in color, and of all different kinds of images that you can use to create these visuals for your presentations. So I hope you can check those out and see if any of them can be useful for you for creating effective visuals. Now, if you are going to show data in your presentation, that's totally fine. You're welcome to. But I just want to run through a couple of examples of the different ways you can show data and what their strengths and their weaknesses are. So first, you can show data in tables. And this is really useful for displaying large amounts of data, especially if you have raw data that you want to show. Now, tables in general have a bad rep for being kind of boring to look at. There's not very much color or anything going on. And it's really hard for people to visualize the trends. So it's a lot of information to take in. So I usually try to avoid tables if possible, unless I'm doing things with, a lot of text for qualitative data that can sometimes be useful. An example of how you can show the same data, but also include some kind of ability to see the trends and include color is by turning it into a heat map. And so in here, we have a scale from low to high with different colors, and the darker the shade of green, the higher the number is. So this is an upgraded table where you can see some of the trends and can be just a little bit more effective. Now, another way that people show their data, depending on the type of data, is by using pie charts. This is really useful for showing comparative or relative proportions of different data points. So if you have percentages in your data and you're looking at different data in that way, let's say, for example, I think this pie chart came because I was comparing the number of graduate students and postdoctoral researchers at the different institutes at UHN. That kind of stuff can be shown in a pie chart. One of the limitations of using pie charts, though, is you can only compare one factor. So each pie chart would be a different factor that you're comparing. And it's really only useful for small data sets or ones where you can use percentages. And if you want to look at larger sets of data and ways to show those, one of the options are scatter plots. And these are plots where you have two axes, an X and a Y. You can look at two different variables and you can look at the comparative relationship between those. So in this case, every different dot is a different data point where you're looking at where the height and the weight meet and then comparing the relationship between them. So what's cool about this is you can really determine kind of correlations between different data sets. You can look at clustering and you can look at really big data sets because you can put a lot of different points on here. Another option you can use is similar is line plots. This is for something that's more continuous. So they're really good for things like time when you're looking at one factor over time because they can go in a continuous line. And so they're good for looking at trends. You wouldn't necessarily use them to look at exact data because you're missing those individual dots for the data points. Another popular way to show your data is to use bar charts. And this is good when comparing data with different categories. So you can do these bar charts in all different kinds of ways so that you can observe trends. You can use vertical bars, you can use horizontal bars, or you can even use stacked bar charts where you can compare subcomponents into categories. And in this case, we're looking at 5 different categories over the percentage, and you're looking at different things within that subcategory. So again, this is really useful for displaying data that is measured in percentages. So 2 last ways you might consider showing your data. One is a Venn diagram. So this is really useful when you're looking at overlap between data sets. This is actually directly from my graduate thesis data. And then there's another kind, which is a Euler diagram, which is like a fancier version of a Venn diagram where the overlap between the data sets is actual proportional in size. So all of the circles are scaled to how many data points are in that set. And I find these are kind of really fun and engaging compared to Venn diagrams. Now, again, we really recommend that you don't have to show data in your presentations. If you can get the point across using a diagram or an image, that can often be more effective because you don't have to explain all of the points. But if you are going to present data in your presentations, consider these different kinds of ways to present your data. Find the one that is the most appropriate for your type of data. If you need help doing that, feel free to talk to your lab members or your PI for help. And if you are going to show data, make sure that you're labeling them really well and that when you're presenting them, you're walking through every element of the data so that people can really understand. So I know in my PhD, I had lots of really intense Western blots that I had to present. And so really, if you want anybody to get anything out of this big piece of data, you have to walk them through and guide their eyes from one set to the next part and tell them what you think they should see, and they can decide for themselves if they see the same thing that you're pointing out. So just some notes if you are deciding to use primary data. Okay, so now we're going to teach you a couple of expert tips for how to increase the accessibility of a presentation to really help all people to understand and be engaged in your presentation. So first, one of the main tips is to really use sans serif fonts. These are fonts that are easy to read, like Arial and Calibri, and they really help just to make it very readable. You want to try to use fonts that are a minimum of size 18 because smaller fonts can be really difficult for people who have some visual impairments. You want to avoid using gendered language or phrases, and this is really important in particular if you're talking about different diseases, that you're using the right language when you're comparing sex and gender and things like that. Of course, you want to use inclusive images, and I really love Canva for this. They have all different kinds of images that you can use that depict different kinds of people and different kinds of scenarios, and I love using those and integrating them into my presentation so everybody feels represented. Another really big part of making your presentations accessible is about thinking about people who have difficulty viewing different colors or differentiating between different colors. So in particular, we're talking about people who are colorblind. And so there's examples here of what a color wheel would look like for a person who's non-colorblind, and that's shown at the top left. And then what if the same exact color wheel would look like for people with 3 different kinds of color blindness. And so you can see in particular, or you may be able to see in particular, the reds and the greens are difficult to differentiate for people with different kinds of color blindness. But more importantly, you don't get the full range of colors. You still have some colors that they're able to see, but you can't differentiate between all of them. So this is really important to remember because it can really change how people can view and interpret your data. So we're looking at this stacked bar chart here, and this is what it would look like to a person with non-colored blind vision. And so there are 5 different colors, and you're showing 5 different kinds of data on this stacked chart here. Now, if you look at the same chart and what it would look like to a person with one of the kinds of color blindness, you can see that not only are the colors not the same, but you're also losing some of the colors. So the bottom 2 colors are viewed as the same color, and then the middle 2 colors are viewed as the same color. So you're actually losing a whole range of the data. So the person, a person looking at that same plot who is colorblind would make completely different conclusions than the person who is non-colorblind. And that really impacts how people will trust your science and will understand your science. So you really want to keep this in mind and try to think about ways to make your data viewable to all people. So an example here, if we're trying to use inclusive color palettes and scales, we can use this color palette here, where again, there's 5 different colors, but the person who is colorblind will not be able to see the same colors, but they can see all of the colors in some way or another. So they can differentiate between all of those colors and they can still see the full range of data. And so what's really useful is there's lots of tools online to teach you about what are inclusive color palettes that you can use. And that simple switch can make it really more accessible to a lot of people. So again, to try to increase the accessibility here, we want to use accessible color palettes, especially avoiding using red with green. This is really important for people who use fluorescence images. A lot of the defaults are red and green, and that can make it really difficult for people to see. One of the alternatives, if you don't want to use colors, is to use contrasting dark and light hues, because you can see, even colorblind people can see that contrast really well. You also have another option of not using color at all and using other elements like shading, lines, or shapes to distinguish between different variables, which can be more accessible. And the last thing, there are also a lot of tools out there where you can test your different figures to see that if they're interpretable to people with different kinds of color blindness. So a great way just to test it out and see if it's accessible. Okay, so some final tips before we wrap up on how to make the best presentations possible. The first one really is to just be excited. I think the number one thing is that if you're not excited about your work, nobody else is going to be. And so you really want to do everything you can to engage the audience and show them how much you care about, how much you loved what you did and learned this summer. So try to do this by making eye contact with the audience. Be yourself and have fun. Be confident. No matter what you're saying, you're sharing something that's personal to you and something that you've learned, and you're the expert in that. You know the most about what you've learned this summer and what made you happy this summer, so just share that. And just have fun, and people will have fun with you. And it's the best way you can make people remember your presentation is being engaged and being excited. And lastly, the best way you can improve your presentation is really to practice with others. I know I talked about this at the beginning, but I just wanted to give you a couple of tips of how you can get feedback. So this is something you can do with people in your lab, your friends, your family, other summer students. You can do this and practice with anybody. And it's actually good to practice with a whole range of different people and ask them, was the pace good? What are you talking too fast, or are you talking too slow? Did you rush parts of the story, or did you do it at a good pace? Are the visuals effective? Are the visuals helping to tell your story, or are they distracting away from it? Are they too complicated? Are they missing information? Did you explain everything clearly? Was it easy to understand, and was all the information needed there? And does the main point come across? At the end of the day, you really just want to get feedback on, did you do what you want to? Did you get your story across? And be really open to the feedback that you get about how to make that presentation better. With that, we wrapped up this session. If you are a UHN research summer student and you're aiming to get the certificate of program completion, please complete the attendance form here. Jordan will also put it in the chat for you. And now we can take some questions if anybody has any questions about the presentations or about presenting in general. I see some presentations, questions from before that I didn't get to answer. Can only UHN employees and students participate? Yes, that is the case. And do we submit a recording? Jordan answered that, but the answer is yes. The presentations in the first round will all be recorded. How many presentations will be selected for the in-person research day? Good question. I forget the exact number, but I think it's around 20, something like that, because the presentations are 3 minutes. So we're able to pull a lot of presentations to win prizes and to get that experience. How do you respond to post-presentation questions when you aren't particularly sure of the answer? That's a great question. I think the number one thing you can do is just be honest about it. Everybody respects when people say, oh, that's a good question, but I don't really know the answer. I'll look it up and get back to you. That's always better than trying to fudge your way through a question if you don't know the answer. You can always give a good try if you can. You can say, oh, I'm not really sure, but I think it might be this, if you think you have a guess, but you're not confident. But the number one thing is you want people to trust you. And so if you don't know the answer, it's okay to say you don't know the answer. It's not really, it's not your job to know everything. Where can we get more information on submission requirements and where we to submit your video? That will be sent out to all of the people who register. Does the presentation have to be in layman's terms? Good question. I think it always depends on who your audience is. So for every presentation, you think about who will be listening to it. And so for these kind of 3-minute talks, especially sharing it with an audience that's so broad of summer students and people in the community that are from different research areas, I think making it as lay as possible is great. Emily used the example of she explained even what a protein was. And maybe you know the answer, but maybe somebody in a bioinformatics field isn't quite up to par on understanding all the mechanics of that. So it's best to just not assume any knowledge, because when you do, you might lose people if you pass over something that they don't really know about. So making it as simple as possible is great. Are there software other than PowerPoint to make better presentations? That's also a great question. I actually like making presentations in Canva as well. They have lots of templates that you can use. And it's great there because you can use all of their images right away and incorporate them into your presentations. They have a pretty good free version, as well as a paid version where you have access to more images. But I like that for presentations, but there's lots of other options you have too. A lot of people who are more talented at illustrations than me use Adobe Illustrator. That can be a powerful way to do too, because you have more power to optimize things and move things around in a very particular way. I never learned that skill, but lots of people do that. But yeah, there's lots of different softwares. I think PowerPoint is an easy one to use. It's pretty accessible. So I use that, but definitely check out if there's other versions, other things you'd like to use. Somebody is asking, perfect, Jordan's got the link in the chat. Any other questions from anybody? I think I've answered all the questions in the chat. Let us know if you're intending on presenting. We'd love to meet you at the Research and Networking Day on August 10th, so make sure you come check that out. And we're so excited to learn about all of your research and what you've learned this summer. Thank you. Thank you for coming. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at ort.admin@uhnresearch.ca. The in-person research presentations will be the same presentation that you gave for the recorded sessions. You can tweak it if you want to, but they will be the same style, 3 minutes. You'll be presenting on a stage with your presentation, and we'll have snacks and things like that for you. And we'll go through a bunch of different presentations and have some time for networking and hanging out with the other summer students. Awesome. Well, thank you all for attending, and we hope to see you soon. You are not limited to only using one slide note. You can use as many visuals as you would like. The sign up for the research day, so there will be another sign up to attend that research day that comes out in a bit. And yes, you are getting 3 minutes in total for your presentation. We will be sending out the recording to this presentation as well as all the slides tomorrow. So take a look at that so you can review all of the information. We'll have everything we talked about today, all of the instructions and everything will be in the follow-up email tomorrow, just in case you missed anything. You can use animations, yes, if you'd like to. I would say animations can sometimes be distracting, so use them appropriately or maybe you think, but we're giving you a little bit more flexibility than 3 minute thesis presentation tabs. You can use multiple slides, and you can use animations if you'd like. That's not a problem. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.